What's up, gatekeepers, and welcome back to another episode of the Mental Training Revolution. Today, we're actually going to work on an activity in a notebook I created that hasn't been released yet. I have no idea when I'm going to release it. CTG just kind of took a different path at the time being, but I called it the Train for Anything Notebook. And so essentially, it's a notebook similar to this podcast, a bunch of different kind of tools, mental training tools, journaling tools, to, of course, help us rewire our brain, give us a better sense of direction, make meaning into the right things. And so, one of those activities that we created in this Train for Anything notebook is something called a values ring. And so, essentially, what you do is you lay out a ring of your values, your most important values. And the reason you want to do this is because after you set your direction or set your aim, and so this would be a goal or something, you actually don't want to continue to think about this aim or think about this destination. It's like when you put into maps, you're going to a certain address. The entire time you're on the drive, you're not going to be consistently re-putting in the destination. And that's a perfect example of people getting lost in that aim or that goal. And they're making the present moment a means to an end, right? They're the only thing they're using the present for is to get to the future. That's a huge problem because you only live your life in the now, in this moment. So what's the point if you're not enjoying it, right? You're not spending time in reality if you're constantly thinking about the future. But the values ring is the most important aspect of knowing your sense of direction as you're on the journey, right? And so instead of telling us, retelling us after we put the destination into our Apple Maps, we're not going to continue to put the same destination in. But what we can do to give ourselves a sense of direction in the present moment is something called the values ring. And so this is a ring of values that are most important to you. But the biggest thing to know while making this is that you make meaning in the correct way. And so people on this podcast know that I'm a big advocator of a healthy relationship with death, right? It's definitely not something we should avoid and not think about. It's totally natural to fear death, but keeping death close to us enriches our life. And so that's why I've made podcasts, talked about how I love to write my whiteboard, you will die today. And this puts into great perspective for me, what day do I want to live today that I'm satisfied at being my last day? And I'm only going to focus on what matters then. Am I going to spend 2 hours thinking about how I can, get more money or gain more followers if I were to die today? No, I don't get lost in that illusion if I keep death close. And so when we create this values ring, we want to combine that death wisdom, as I like to say, with the creation of the values. So it's okay to value money, but make sure you're detailed in that response. Like maybe you value money because you want to get to financial freedom. That's a very positive and healthy relationship with money. But say you do have financial freedom, right? Money probably shouldn't be a value anymore. Getting more of it's not going to make you more happy. It's statistically proven that after you reach financial freedom, it does nothing to add to your happiness, right? But say someone isn't financially free, then it makes total sense, right? You could completely change your life because you can start spending more times on things that actually matter, like learning how to build your well-being. But that can't happen if you're in a state of constant struggle with money-wise because you literally need that to live. But once you reach that equilibrium and it's easy to live with the current money state you have, then that's when we need to change our relationship. And I really want to put that out there on all these podcasts. It's not that negative emotions or negative connotations are bad. It's the relationship we have with them now are overused, right? We're overextending our relationship with negative emotions, and we still need them, but we need to use them probably in a much healthier way. And so what you would do in this activity, gatekeepers, is you're going to write 12 value rings, okay? And while you do it, I want you to keep death close, what actually matters. If I didn't have a lot of time left on this earth, you're going to really focus on what matters. Like people talk about putting themselves on their deathbed. That's another example of how to make, the right decision is putting yourself in those simulations or those type of exercises. And so when you're making these values, this will give you um, this will give you a sense of what to focus on as you're on that journey towards that destination I was talking about. And so while you're going through your Google Maps and you're going to your destination, you don't have to constantly think about where you're going. You can think about your values ring. Okay, so along the journey, you're just focused on what actually matters. And I like to call making meaning, right? And so what we're doing in this values ring is making meaning. But I really need you to make sure as you do this, you're making meaning into the right things. And you do that by keeping death close. And so examples of some of the things that I put on my value ring, you want to try and get 12. And so it's a wheel of values. And anytime you're struggling, you can go back to this value ring and see, am I focusing on the right things? Because a great way to know you have the right values is if you go to the values ring when you're struggling and you have an answer. That means you have the right values. And so, an example of this could be the present moment. So, the present moment is a very, very big value for me, and a big value for me to live my life by is to try and be as present as I can. Because if I'm present, I can intentionally be the best version of myself. And of course, the only life we have is every single moment of now. We can't live in the past or the future. We can only live here. And so that's a huge value for me. So if I'm struggling, I'm likely not in the now. I'm probably not in the present moment. And so when I go back to my values, it can remind me, hey, this is what actually matters. This is when you keep death in perspective. This is making meaning into the right things. There's nothing to regret if you stay completely present. And that's just a simple example of something I'm valuing. Another could be family, right? And so a lot of times this value ring will be great for you when making decisions. And so family is one that, especially as you're growing up, say you're listening to this and you're in high school or you're a young adult, you can get lost from your family. Um, and I strongly encourage you just keep that death in perspective. Would you want to resolve this conflict with your family member? And hopefully the answer is yes if you do keep that perspective. But that's another example of the value ring times death wisdom is going to give you the best answers of making meaning. And so your exercise for today, gatekeepers, is to list 12 values, but while doing that, keep a healthy perspective of death on your mind. And this is going to be your compass now. So when you set your aim, your values ring is your compass to give you that direction in this present moment of how to live, of how to do things. And so I really love this activity because you can visually see what you should be valuing in your life. And after you've listed the 12 things, gatekeepers, then what you're going to do is write down if you think you need to increase this value in your life, decrease it, or keep it the same. And so, say you have a really, really good relationship with your family. And we're not saying you want to spend less time with your family, but this might be an example when you want to start focusing on other values. And so each month, when you revisit your value ring, you're going to decide which ones are kind of weaker and you're going to build upon that. And so right now, you're just going to use a line or a positive for the 12 values rings that you write out. And so, an example for me, so being present is one of my biggest values. I truly believe that's the most valuable thing we can do in life. And so I'm going to write increase because I still want that to be a focus. I'm not perfect at it yet. So I want to continue to build on that value of being present. Family, I can definitely do a better job being more family oriented than I am right now. That's another thing that I can increase. Um, Financial freedom is one of your values, right? For me right now, that's definitely one I don't need to increase compared to family or being present. And so that's one where I would just keep the same. So each month, kind of what your focus is and your weaknesses are within your values ring. So that way, you know what to focus on within your values. And so that's all the episode is today, gatekeepers, is to build a values ring for yourself. Do it right now if you can before you forget. And anytime you're struggling, go back to this values ring, okay, to remember what actually matters and make meaning into the right things with this values ring by bringing death into perspective. And then, of course, analyze which ones are the weaker value, and that should try and be your focus of the month. And so, what I try and do is revisit my values every month and, of course, label which ones are weaker than others. And for that month, I'm going to really try and focus on these weaknesses within my values, within what actually matters, and within my making of meaning. And so I encourage you all really visually see your values, see which ones you have to improve upon, and make meaning into the right things by keeping death close. Thanks for listening, gatekeepers. Stay tuned for the next episode and send me your values ring if any of you are doing it. I'd love to build a better communication with the listeners here. Remember, my number 608-201-7384. Send me a picture of your values ring to prove that you did it. And hopefully we can get a lot of text messages, gatekeepers. Thanks for listening. I'm Coach Jack. We're out, baby. Peace.